pivot back, you were talking about protecting your assets.
Yeah.
I think that most of us would agree we probably pay enough in taxes. I think most people would agree with that. And so
Yeah.
should we have to pay more?
All right.
State
So
taxes?
I'm gonna redirect this conversation just a little bit for the reason that right now in the current tax climate we have, if you are a resident of the state of South Dakota, I'm betting maybe your audience base is beyond the borders of South Dakota. But here in South Dakota, we don't have any estate or inheritance tax at the state level. At the federal level, each individual can pass over, I can't remember the exact amount right now because it just changed at the first of the year. We'll say approximately $12 million. So a husband and wife get to double that because they each have the credit. So there are very few folks who really ever have to worry about paying federal estate taxes. On the Nebraska side of the border, there is a state level inheritance tax. As long as the assets are going to lineal descendants, it's approximately 1% of the value of the estate. There's a $40,000 deduction for the value of the estate for each specific recipient. So all of this to say, the inheritance tax in Nebraska is not horrible. There's really not a lot you can do to protect against it. But the average person here in South Dakota generally never has to worry about death-related taxes. The one thing that seems to drive people's fear for asset protection and to really develop good strategies to preserve the estate, whatever the estate is made up as. Around here, a lot of folks come to me. They've got an 80 of land that they purchased and the old family quarter that was inherited, or the family farm. That's a huge one. This is a rural area of the country. We have a lot of folks that are just terrified of the notion that as mom and dad get older, health starts failing. The elephant in the room is always the nursing home. The only shop we have in town for nursing homes is Majestic Bluffs. There's assisted living, of course, that's quite a bit more cost effective, but Majestic Bluffs is I'm not sure I want to put what I understand their price point to be, but
it's not cheap out there.
It is extremely expensive. And expect to spend north of $100,000 a year on the cost of nursing home care. That's what has people largely worked up from an estate planning perspective. From the entrepreneur, business-related liability, depending upon the nature of the business. If you're a designer of widgets, but you're afraid your widget might hurt somebody, you could someday have to fend off a product's liability action. You build a widget that someday they discover has hurt a whole lot of people. Your insurance may not be enough to protect you. So it's the same notion of asset protection. What I can't think of now that might come out of the woodwork to clobber me later, what can I do to make sure that no matter what, I have the wealth I spent a lifetime building, or at least portions of that wealth, is guaranteed to pass on to my children. There are wonderful tools for those who plan ahead. The key tool that seems to excite people these days is a variation of trust. And I'm not sure how deep in the weeds you want me to get there, because I could fill up another hour of time just talking about trusts, what they are and how they work. But suffice it to say, if you're willing to live with a little bit of compromise in terms of the stuff that you want to protect, your ability to directly enjoy access to some of those assets, you can shield them in a trust that will make sure that the basic rule of debtor-creditor law is thwarted, which is that whatever I can get to without restrictions, my creditors can force me to give them. So if you can disrupt that rule through the use of a trust, you can guarantee that whatever you put in that trust is not reachable by an unanticipated future creditor. It's guaranteed for your kids. So that seems to be where things tend to point when folks come in and say, man, I spent a lifetime building this nest egg. How do I keep it? Because I can't predict the future.
And I think as business owners and entrepreneurs, we are trying to keep our belts tight and have the bottom line be, as good as we can be. But just from hearing you, I fully believe in the value that an attorney can bring to business planning, to the conversation. You should run this by somebody to make sure that you're protecting yourself.
Goodness, yes.
Well, of course, your bias is there.
Well,
but
absolutely,
I
the
would
most
encourage
biased, given that that's my day job and all. But the prevalence of do-it-yourself services that are out there, LegalZoom. Maybe if you're doing your own medical power of attorney, I've seen the LegalZoom medical power of attorney. It's not a bad document,
Right.
but you don't get the advice, the guidance, the pros and cons, the options, and I have seen people totally mess things up trying to do it on their own, and there's no substitute for the guidance.
Right. Protect against the risk of making an egregious error by having a good attorney. So, Ross, I want to thank you for being on the show. This was really good. If you're listening, comment on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, anywhere you find us about what you think about today's podcast. We got a little bit more into the details of things, but I think it's valuable. I know I sit with clients all the time that want to know about this stuff. When push comes to shove, somebody passes away, what happens next? You can, and I encourage you to reach out to a good attorney like Ross Denherter. Ross, where could somebody find you if they were looking for you?
Oh, all right. If you ever needed to call me, I can be reached at 605-665-0494. We are located in Yankton at the corner of 4th and Broadway. 329 Broadway Avenue is our physical address. If you would like to meet with me, feel free to call our office and schedule an appointment through our assistant, Linda.
Thanks again for being on the show, Ross. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the invite.